Okay, everybody, we have 3 stories tonight. Story 1 is about a long-haul trucker running the Old Devil's Highway, US 491. Pulls into a way station that's been closed for 20 years. Story 2 is about an oilfield night crew on a pad 30 miles outside of Farmington. Foreman walks off into the dark to check a valve. 40 minutes later, he walks back in wrong. Story 3 is an overnight sheriff's dispatcher in a specific county takes a 911 call from a man at a wreck, then another call from the same man at a location 90 miles away. Then the voices start changing. So, settle in, lights off, headphones if you got them. Quick reminder for everybody, YouTube has refused to approve my appeal for demonetization due to inauthentic content, so they are stealing all earnings from these videos, so I get paid nothing for my work. If you wish to support me, the most direct way to do so is the Dark Horror Narrations merch store, which is now live at darkhorrornarrations.com. Other ways include through Spotify. Spotify is more creator friendly, or just simply watching the videos and sharing them so the channel continues to grow. With that said, let us get into the horror, and thank you all for all the support as always. Hope you enjoy.
Story 1: The Closed Way Station. The reefer kicked off again, and I tapped the lever, listening to the compressor catch and start up again. That made 3 times in the last hour. The load behind me was 42,000 pounds of boxed beef out of a packing plant in Pueblo, headed for a distributor in Phoenix. And if the temperature climbed too far in the middle of the trailer, the receiver was going to tank me on the next dispatch list. I knew this. The truck knew this too. It was being an asshole about it tonight. It was October. Late. Somewhere around 2 in the morning, give or take. I had lost track when I switched from coffee to the Camel I should not have lit, and now my mouth tasted like burnt brake pads, and the windshield was fogging at the edges because the heater was working too hard. The half moon was up over the desert to my left, and it threw enough light onto the long flat ground beyond the shoulder that I could see the shape of mesas in the distance, dark against a darker sky. I was southbound on 491. The state of New Mexico had renumbered the corridor in 2003 because the old number, 666, had a reputation that crews and tourists alike were tired of. Devil's Highway, people called it. Old men in truck stops still called it 666, the way old men still call Sears the place that sold them their first lawnmower. I had driven this stretch maybe 200 times. I knew the bends and the diners that were open and the ones that were not. I knew where cell coverage dropped and came back. Between Shiprock and Gallup, there was a 40-mile stretch where only the AM radio worked, and even that came in chewed. I had a daughter named Becca down in Phoenix, 22, living with her mother and a boyfriend I had never met and did not want to meet. I sent Becca $150 on the 15th of every month and had done it for 8 straight years without missing once. She did not thank me for it. I did not expect her to. The money was for her, not for the thanks. I had a photograph of her tucked behind the visor above my head, taken at her high school graduation, the kind of photo where she is smiling because they told her to, and her eyes are looking at something past the camera. I had taken it down once to show another driver in Tucumcari and then put it back. I had not taken it down since. There is a thing where you protect something by not pulling it out where the air can get at it. The Peterbilt was a 379, an old one, bought used from a guy in Albuquerque who had been driving it for 15 years before he hung it up. The CB did not work. The AM did. The reefer was a Carrier Vector, and on its best day it ran quiet, and on its worst it sounded like a man clearing his throat for 20 seconds at a time. I had come up over Raton Pass earlier that night, and I had watched the temperature on the dash drop from 41 down to 29 in the time it took to clear the top. And I had thought what I always thought up there, which was that whoever decided to put an interstate through that gap had to have been either very brave or very stupid. Now, I was down out of the mountains and west across the high desert, and the temperature outside was 35 and steady. I checked my mirrors. Nothing behind me. Nothing ahead but the road and the white lines and the occasional reflective post the desert had not yet eaten. I should mention here that I do not believe in much. I am not religious. I had a mother who was, and I had an uncle who claimed to have seen something in the woods outside Truchas one summer when he was a kid, but I figured the uncle was lying for the same reason kids embellish, which is that the world is duller than you want it to be when you are young and you would rather pretend otherwise. The St. Christopher medal hanging from my rear view was a gift from my ex's mother, and I had never had the heart to take it down even after the marriage came apart. She died 2 years after the divorce. Heart thing. Sudden. The medal stayed because if I took it down it would have felt like I was killing her again, which is stupid, but I drove 1,500 miles a week, and I did not need any additional company in my head. The AM radio had been playing a station out of Farmington called Ken. Country oldies, mostly. Some news on the hour, some pre-recorded local weather. I had it on low for the last hour because it kept the cab from feeling like an empty cab, and because there was a particular DJ working overnights this fall who knew his catalog and did not talk much. I came up on a bend that took me southwest, and the signal went out for a few seconds and then came back in. That happened twice an hour through here. Normal. The song that came back in was an old Loretta Lynn song my mother used to play in the kitchen when she was washing dishes. You Ain't Woman Enough, and I let myself listen to it for the first couple of bars, and then I turned the volume down, because the smell of dish soap had started to climb out of nowhere into the cab. That should have been the first thing I noticed. Not the song. The smell. The cab smelled like dish soap. The yellow kind, in the squeeze bottle, the one with the green logo. My mother had used that brand for 40 years until she went into the home, and then for 2 more years after that because my sister kept buying it for her even when she did not know what a sink was anymore. I had not smelled it in maybe 10 years. I had not thought about it in maybe 5. And there it was, in the cab, plain as if somebody had cracked the bottle open in the passenger seat. I cranked the window down. Cold air came in. The smell went out. I left the window down for half a mile, and then I cranked it back up because the cold was making my hands hurt. The smell did not come back. That should have been enough. It was not. A few miles later, I came past a coyote on the shoulder. Coyotes on 491 are common as crows. I have seen them dead more often than alive, and alive more often than I have seen them dead. They run light and they cross the road in the half-second after the headlights come over a rise, and they are across the shoulder and into the scrub before a foot can find the brake. They do not stand. They move. That is their whole arrangement with the world. This one was standing right at the white line, broadside to the road, looking off into the desert. Not at me, not at the truck. Off into the desert, like it had been told to stand there and was waiting for the next instruction. Its tail was down, its ears were up. The wind moved, its fur, and I saw that, the fur moving, and that was the only thing about it that looked normal. I went past it at 63 miles an hour. In the mirror, I watched it for as long as my eyes could hold the shape, and it did not move. It was still standing when I lost sight of it. The mile marker said 56. I noticed because I wrote it down in the margin of my logbook later that night, and the number is still there. I caught movement in my passenger mirror about 4 miles after the coyote. A pair of headlights, low to the ground, the kind that belonged to a pickup truck. Ford or Chevy. Hard to say at distance. The pickup was closing. I let it close. I expected it to come around me on the left and pass and disappear over the next rise like every other late-night pickup did. It did not. It came up to about a quarter mile back, and then it stayed there. Held the gap exactly. I watched it for 10 miles. Sometimes it dropped to a half mile back. Sometimes it came up to less than 200 yards. It never tried to pass. The CB did not work. The AM was playing a song I did not know. The voice was a woman's, low and slow, almost a hum. I tried to focus on the road. At mile marker 48, the pickup was not behind me anymore. I had looked away to check my gauges, and when I looked back, the headlights were gone. There had been no turnoff. There had been no side road. There had been no place where a vehicle could have pulled out of the lane and into the desert. The pickup was just gone. I told myself I had missed a turnoff in the dark. The desert hides a lot of dirt roads. That is what I told myself. I kept rolling south, with the wind quartering off the desert to my right. The road there bends slightly west and then comes back south, and the desert opens wide on both sides, and you can see for 40 miles in the daytime. At night you can see the road and not much else. The half moon was high now, leaning towards setting. The temperature on the dash read 33. There is a way station between Shiprock and Gallup, or there was. The state had built it in the early 90s and then shut it down sometime around the financial crisis and never reopened it. The little brick booth sat off the shoulder behind a chain-link fence with weeds growing through it. The scale plates were still in the road, but the signs that said "Way Station Open" had been folded down for almost 20 years. Nobody had bothered to take the booth down because nobody had bothered to budget for taking it down. Tonight the booth had lights on. I saw them from maybe a mile out. Yellow window light, soft, like a man had a lamp on inside. The chain-link gate was folded back. The sign that said "Way Station Open" was up and lit from below by a sodium bulb that had not been lit in 20 years. I knew the station was closed. I knew it had been closed since 2008, 2009 at the latest. I had passed it those same 200 times. The booth had been dark every single one of those times. Dark on a Tuesday in July, and dark on a Friday in February, and dark on the worst storm I had ever driven through, which was a March blizzard that had nearly put me in the ditch, and that had given me time to look hard at the booth as I crawled past it, and the booth had been dark then too. It was not dark now. The lights were on, and the sign said "Open." A man in a uniform was standing in the gravel pull-off. He was waving me in with a flashlight. I let off the throttle. I should have kept going. I had a load to deliver. The station had been closed for 20 years. There was no DOT in the world that was going to issue me a fine for not stopping at a station that was officially decommissioned. I could have pushed the throttle back down and rolled past at 60 and been in Gallup in another half hour, and the whole thing would have been a story I told at the truck stop the next morning. The one about the time the dead way station turned its lights on for me. But I had been driving for 11 hours straight. My logbook said different, but my logbook was a polite fiction, the way every logbook is a polite fiction. I was tired. I was confused about the coyote and the pickup and the dish soap smell, and the man with the flashlight looked exactly like a DOT officer, hat low, uniform pressed, the orange vest snug across the shoulders, the flashlight in one hand and the clipboard in the other. He waved me in steady and patient like a man who has done this 10,000 times and knows the rhythm. I pulled in. The brakes hissed. The truck rolled forward across the scale plates and onto the shoulder beyond. I set the parking brake. I left the engine running because I always left the engine running. I rolled the driver's window down. The night air came in cold and a little wet. The officer walked up. He came across the gravel in a straight line. His pace was even. His boots were the kind with the steel toe and the round laces, and they did not make the sound boots make on gravel. They made a softer sound, like he was walking on packed dirt instead. I noticed that because I notice sounds when I am tired and the night is quiet. He came around to my window. He was tall, maybe 6'4". His face was in shadow under the hat. The vest said NMDOT in white letters. The patch on his sleeve had the state seal of New Mexico, and the seal was correct, the eagle and the cactus and the wreath all where they should be. And I noticed that too, because I had looked at that seal 1,000 times on 1,000 state troopers and DOT officers in my life. The seal was right. "Evening," he said. The voice was flat, not unfriendly. Flat. "Evening," I said. "Logbook, please. And your bill of lading." I handed them down. He took them. His hand came up to the window, and the fingers closed around the documents, and the hand went back down. The hand was clean. The fingernails were trimmed. The wrist had a watch on it, a black-faced watch with the second hand sweeping. The watch face was correct. The watch hands were moving. The time on the watch was 3:12. The dashboard clock said 2:47. I tell myself, looking back at it, that I noticed that and put it together. I did not. I noticed it and let it go. The brain does that when the brain is tired. It registers things and shelves them, and you only find the shelf in the morning when you go looking. The officer flipped through the logbook. He was quick. He was professional. He turned the pages without dog-earing them, and he held them with the flat of his hand and not the fingertips, which is the way somebody who reads a lot of logbooks holds them. He flipped to the bill of lading. He read it. He flipped back. "Beef out of Pueblo," he said. "That is right. Phoenix delivery. Tomorrow afternoon." He nodded. He kept flipping. The watch on his wrist read 3:13 now. The dashboard clock read 2:47 still. "Anything in the load besides beef?" he said. "Nothing in the load besides beef." "How long you been driving tonight?" 6 hours. 6 hours, he said. He said it like he was tasting it. Then he said, "Wade, when's the last time you saw Becca?" I want to be clear about what happened in my chest when he said her name. It was not fear, not yet. Fear takes a second. What I felt first was the kind of recognition you feel when somebody you do not know says something only somebody you know would say. The shape of the words was wrong. The shape of her name in his mouth was wrong. The shape of my name in his mouth was wrong. I had not given him my name. The logbook had my name on the cover page. He had not turned to the cover page. "What did you say?" I said. He looked up from the logbook. The hat shifted a little when he looked up, and I saw his face for the first time. He had a face. It was a face. I am being careful about how I describe it, because I have been careful about it since that night and have not described it out loud to a single person yet. The face was a man's face. 40s. Lean. A jaw that had been shaved recently. Brown eyes. Brown eyes with a wet shine to them. The kind of wet that comes from being a little too wet, the way the eyes of a fish look when the fish has been on ice too long. The face smiled. "Asked how long since you talked to your daughter?" He said, "It is a habit I have. I ask the drivers about family. Helps keep them awake the rest of the way. Long drives like this, fellas get into their heads." "Right," I said. "When did you talk to her last?" "Last week." He said. He kept smiling. The smile did not go up to the eyes. The eyes were doing their own thing, looking past me into the cab, looking at the visor, looking at the photograph behind the visor, which I had not pulled out, and which was face down to the cab anyway, and which could not have been visible to him from where he was standing. "That is good," he said. "That is real good. She doing okay?" "She is doing okay." "That is good," he said again. "You know, I had a daughter once." He let that sit there. I did not pick it up. I did not know what to do with it. He kept smiling. He flipped a page in the logbook. He did not look at the page. He looked at me. "Pretty," he said. "She is pretty." I looked at him. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the visor again. The visor was up. The photograph was tucked behind the visor. I had not pulled it down. He had not seen it. There was no way he could have seen it. "Senior portrait, I would guess," he said. "Those kind of trees. Late afternoon light." Photographer told her to smile, and she did, but her eyes were looking past him. I did not say anything. There was nothing to say to that. "That is how you know it is a senior portrait," he said. "The eyes are always looking past." He turned another page in the logbook. He was not looking at the page. He was smiling at the visor. The smile was patient. He had all the time he needed. "Funny thing about daughters," he said. "You think you are protecting them. You think you are doing right by them. You send them money. You keep their picture up where you can see it. And the whole time the world is just out there doing what the world does. And you are pushing 42,000 pounds of frozen meat down a highway in the middle of the night to send her $150 she did not ask for." I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. You ever think about that, Wade? He said. How thin it all is. The watch on his wrist read 3:22 now. The dashboard clock had not moved. The radio in the cab was off, and I did not remember turning it off, but the speaker was making a low sound under the engine, a humming, the kind of hum a refrigerator makes when it is about to fail. I need to get going, I said. My voice did not sound right in my own ears. Got a delivery window. You sure do, he said. He flipped another page. Last thing. Sign here, please. He held up a sheet of paper. There was a pen clipped to it. The paper said, NM. Inspection record, across the top. The fields below were blank. He held it up against the side of my window and put a pen in my hand, and I signed where the line was, and when I went to give the pen back, he held his hand out, and his hand was further away than it had been a second before, and I had to lean out of the window further than I wanted to lean to give him the pen. I leaned, I gave him the pen, he took it, he stepped back. All right, Wade, drive safe. He stepped back another 2 steps. The hat tilted forward again. His face went back into shadow. He raised one hand in a small wave, and the wave was not a man's wave. The wrist did not pivot the way wrists pivot. The whole hand moved as if it were attached to the arm by a stiff hinge. I cranked the window up. My hands were shaking, and I did not want to look at them. I shifted into first gear. I lifted the clutch slow and let the truck roll forward across the gravel. The mirrors caught him standing in the pull-off with the flashlight at his side. The flashlight was off. He had not turned it back on after waving me in. I had not noticed that he had not turned it back on. I noticed it now in the mirror, and I noticed it again, and I noticed that he was not moving. He was just standing there, watching the truck pull away. I got onto the shoulder. I got onto the road. I built up to 50 and held there, and kept the mirror on him for as long as I could. He stood watching. The flashlight was off. The booth behind him still had its yellow lights on. The sign that said open was still lit. At the last second before the curve took him out of sight, he started walking. He walked back toward the booth. The walk was not a man's walk. The walk had the right number of steps and the right rhythm, and the legs went up and down the way legs do, but somewhere in the joints there was something extra. The hips moved further than hips move. The knees came up higher than knees come up. The whole gait was a translation of a man's walk, performed by something that had read about it once. Then the curve took him. I put my foot on the floor. The Peterbilt 379 does not have a lot of pickup at the bottom. She is geared for steady highway pulling, not for getting away. I held the throttle to the floor, and I worked through the gears the way I had learned to work through them. Smooth, no jerk, no slip, because a hard shift on a refrigerated load that has already been jostled this long can crack a corner brace if you do it wrong. I built up to 60, to 65, to 70. The needle on the speedometer wavered at 70 because that is the top of the governor on the engine, and 70 was what I had. The corridor opened up in front of me, straight and black. The half moon was lower now, and it had started to throw long shadows across the road. I looked in the mirror. The booth was a dot of yellow behind me and getting smaller. For 2 miles I thought I was clear. Then I saw the headlights. They were not behind me. They were to my right, off the shoulder, out in the scrub. They came up parallel to the trailer, and they held there. 2 yellow circles, low, the height of a pickup. The pickup I had lost. The one that had been behind me before the way station. I looked again. I tried to make sense of it. The shoulder ran for 40 feet on either side, and then it dropped into a shallow ditch, and then it climbed out, and there was scrub and red sand for miles. There was no road out there. There were no tracks. There was no way a pickup could be running parallel to me at 70 miles an hour through that ground. The shocks on a pickup, even a good pickup, would not survive that ground at that speed. The headlights held. I held the throttle. A mile passed, then another. The yellow circles stayed level with the trailer. I could not see the body of the truck behind them. The light from them did not throw forward the way headlights throw forward. They were just 2 yellow circles, holding pace. The AM radio was off. I had not turned it off. I tried to turn it back on. The volume knob spun freely. I tried the seek button. The seek button cycled through static, station after station of static, and on the third cycle the speaker made a sound like a man clearing his throat for 20 seconds straight, and I turned the radio all the way down. The smell of dish soap was back in the cab. It was thick this time. I cranked the window down. The air outside smelled like dish soap. The whole desert smelled like dish soap. I cranked the window back up. I started to talk to myself. I do not talk to myself. I am not a man who narrates. I have driven 600 miles in a single shift without saying a single word out loud, not even to the radio, not even to a cup of coffee. That night I talked to myself. I said, "You keep going. You keep going. The town is 20 miles. You keep going." The yellow circles held. Sometimes they came in closer. Sometimes they fell back. Once, for half a mile, they ran ahead of the truck 20 yards off the passenger door, like they were leading me. Then they fell back. I tried the cell phone. The bars on the cell phone read no service, which they had read for 40 miles, and which they would read for another 20. I tried it anyway. I tried to call Becca. I do not know why I tried to call Becca. I had nothing to say to her. I had no warning to give her. The call did not connect. The screen sat there with the spinning circle for a long time, and then it gave up and went back to no service. I put the phone down. I held the wheel. The yellow circles held. I do not know what made me look up. There is a thing about driving at night where the eye learns to focus on the white line and to ignore the high beam of an oncoming car, and to ignore the dome of the cab and the dashboard glow, and to live for hours in a narrow column of attention that runs from your eyes to the road. You can hold that column for a long time. You can hold it through fatigue and through bad weather and through dehydration and through a marriage falling apart in slow motion. It is the most disciplined thing a trucker does. The column breaks when something snaps it. A deer, a pickup pulling out, a shadow that the headlights catch and then lose. The column breaks, and the eye has to find it again. The column broke when I saw the shape on the road ahead. It was about 100 yards out. It was on the center line. It was running. The shape was on 4 legs when I first saw it. It was about the size of a large dog. Tail down, head low. It was running. It was running at the speed of a vehicle, not the speed of an animal. Animals do not run at the speed of a vehicle in a straight line down the center line of a highway. They run in bursts. They cut across. They flinch from light. This thing did not flinch from light. I took my foot off the throttle, and I let the truck slow. The shape held the center line. The truck slowed. The shape slowed too, but not as fast. It stayed about 100 yards ahead. Then it stood up. I will say that again. The thing on the road stood up. The front legs that had been pumping like the front legs of a coyote came up off the road, and the body straightened, and the back legs, which had been the back legs of an animal, became the legs of a man. And the gait did not break. The body went from horizontal to vertical in the space of 3 running steps without changing speed. The thing on the road was a man, running at the speed of my truck, 60 miles an hour, down the center line, in the dark. The face is the part I will not describe. There was a face. It turned and looked at me. The head went around farther than a neck goes around. The shoulder did not move. The neck did. The head turned and the eyes were on me, and the mouth did something I am not going to put into words. The engine sound went away. I do not know when. I think the engine sound was there, and then the engine sound was not there. The cab was silent, except for the high, thin whine that the air conditioner makes when it has nothing to push against, which it should not have been making because I had not turned the air conditioner on. I sat there at 60 miles an hour, watching a man shape running down the road in front of me at the speed of my truck, and I could not hear the engine. The thing on the road kept running. The face stayed turned toward me. I held the wheel with both hands. I did not press the throttle. I did not press the brake. The truck slowed by maybe 2 miles an hour because the engine was not pulling. The thing on the road slowed to match. I wish I could say I did something. I wish I could say I prayed, or that I called my daughter on the satellite phone, or that I steered around the thing and barreled past it. I did none of those things. I held the wheel. I watched. For a quarter mile the engine made no sound. The thing on the road ran ahead of me, head turned, eyes on me, mouth doing its thing. The yellow circles to my right held position off the shoulder. The smell of dish soap thickened. The St. Christopher medal in the rear view turned, slow on its little chain, as if something had blown against it. There was no air moving in the cab. I had the vents closed and the window up. The metal turned. Anyway, it turned the wrong way. It turned in a direction the chain should not have allowed. It turned, and it kept turning, and the chain did not bind. I started to say the only thing I had left to say. I said her name. I said Becca. I said it once. I said it again. I said it 3 or 4 times. I did not know I was saying it until I heard my own voice, and my own voice sounded like a stranger's voice, and I stopped. The thing on the road slowed. Not stopped. Slowed. The 100 yards between us closed to 90, then to 80, then to 50. I did not press the brake. I could not press the brake. My foot was no longer connected to anything. The truck rolled forward at 60 miles an hour, and the gap closed, and the thing held its centerline position and waited. At 40 yards I could see the back of its head in the headlights. The hair on the back of the head was wrong. It was not arranged like hair. It was arranged like fur that had been pressed flat by something heavy and was beginning to lift back into place. It was the wrong color. It was the wrong length. It was on the wrong head. At 20 yards, the thing stepped sideways out of the center line, smooth, no break in its running, and dropped back along the passenger side of the cab and held position next to the right side window. I looked. I did not want to look. I looked. It was running. It was running at 60 miles an hour, 3 feet from the passenger door, on 2 legs, arms moving the way arms move, and it was looking at me through the glass. The face was a face I had never seen before. It had eyes. It had a mouth. The mouth was not smiling. The mouth was open, and the inside of the mouth was the wrong color. I cannot describe what color. I cannot describe colors I have not seen before. The thing kept pace. For maybe 1/10 of a mile it ran beside the cab, 3 feet from my window, and the face stayed on me, and I held the wheel, and I did not turn my head away, because I knew, the way you know when you are 7 years old and a dog is showing you its teeth, that turning my head away would be worse than looking. Then it dropped back. The face went out of the window. The arm swung. It moved to the back of the trailer. I could not see it in the mirror anymore. I do not know where it went. I do not know if it kept running behind me, or if it went off into the scrub, or if it climbed up onto the trailer. The cab was silent. The thing was back on the road in front of me a minute later. Not slowed, not turned. It was just there, again, ahead, on the center line, running. I do not know how long this lasted. I have tried to figure it out later. The mile markers were not visible to me. I was not looking at them. I was looking at the thing on the road. If I had to guess, I would say 6 or 7 minutes. Could have been less, could have been 20. Then the truck hit the cattle guard at the Tohatchi line. The Tohatchi line is a metal grate set into the road right before the town. It is there because cattle wander out of the ranches west of the highway, and the grate keeps them from crossing into the town. Every long-distance trucker on 491 knows the cattle guard at Tohatchi. You can feel it through the steering wheel from half a mile away if you know what to listen for. I did not feel it. I heard it. The grate made the sound it makes when a 40-ton truck rolls over it. A clatter, like a railing being run with a stick, only louder, like teeth on teeth. And the second the clatter started, the engine sound came back. The truck shuddered. The reefer kicked on. The radio came back, mid-song, and the song was a country song I knew, and the woman singing was not the woman who had been singing the song that had not been a song before. And the thing on the road was gone. Not slowed. Not turned. Gone. The road in front of me was empty. The headlights threw their beams ahead, and the white line ran straight, and the sky to my left was getting just a little lighter at the edge because dawn was an hour away, and that was all. The yellow circles to my right were gone too. I looked again. The scrub was empty. The desert was empty. There was nothing in any direction but the road and the sage and the slow gray edge of morning starting to push against the horizon. I drove into Tohatchi at 20 miles an hour. The town has about 600 people in it. There were no streetlights on the main drag because the budget for them had been cut some years before, but there were houses with porch lights, and the porch lights were on, and that was enough. I drove through Tohatchi at 20 miles an hour. I did not look at the mirror. I did not look at the side windows. I looked at the road and the porch lights and the road, and I drove. The yellow circles were not behind me. They had stayed back at the cattle guard. I pulled into Gallup an hour later. The truck stop at the east end of town was open. I pulled in. I parked. I sat in the cab with the engine running and watched the sky turn gray and then a kind of bone color and then pink. When the pink had turned to blue, I climbed down out of the cab and I went into the truck stop and I bought a cup of coffee and a pre-wrapped sandwich and I sat at a booth by the window. And I did not look at the cab through the window. I sat there for 2 hours. I did not call my dispatch. I did not call my daughter. I did not call anyone. I got back in the truck at 8 in the morning. I drove to Phoenix. I delivered the beef. I picked up a return load. I drove back the way I had come, except I went east on Interstate 40 out of Gallup instead of north back up the corridor, and I have not driven 491 since. That was 3 years ago almost. I still drive. I still work the Southwest. I take loads through New Mexico when I have to. I take Interstate 40 east and Interstate 40 west, and I run produce up to Salt Lake on the 85s. I still have the photograph of Becca. I send her the $150 on the 15th. A few months after that night, I was sitting in a diner in Tucumcari, and a driver I knew, a guy named Carl, who I had known for 15 years, was sitting across from me, and he asked me if anything was different. I asked him what he meant. He said, I had lost weight. He said, I looked tired. He said, you got a girl on your mind? I took the photograph of Becca out of my wallet, because I had moved it from the visor to the wallet by then. I do not know why. I showed Carl a picture. He nodded, said she was a pretty girl, said she had her dad's eyes. He gave the picture back. I put it back in the wallet. I went to slide it into the sleeve, and I happened to look at it one more time, and I have not looked at it since. Her smile in the photograph is the same smile it has always been. The smile she had when the photographer told her to smile, and she did. Her eyes are looking past the camera. They have always looked past the camera. The trees behind her are the same trees. The light is the same light. But there is a shape behind her left shoulder in the trees that I do not remember being in the picture when I took it down off the visor that night in October. The shape is small, and the trees are dark, and a person who did not know the picture might never see it. I have not shown the photograph to anyone since Tucumcari. I have not pulled it out of the sleeve. I keep it because I send her money on the 15th, and I keep the picture because she is my daughter. I leave the porch light on at the house now. I never used to. I leave it on all night, and I leave it on when I am on the road, and my landlord asked me once, last summer, why the porch light is always on. I told him I had had some bulbs go bad. He nodded. He moved on. He did not ask again. The road south of Shiprock is a road I do not drive. The radio in my new truck plays whatever I put in it, satellite, and I never run AM after dark. The St. Christopher medal is still on the rear view. I have not taken it down. I do not know what good it did me that night, or what good it would do me again. But I do not want to find out. Some nights I dream that I am back on 491. The cab is silent. The road is empty. The thing on the road is ahead of me, and it is running, and it is looking back. I wake up before the head turns all the way around. I wake up. I make coffee. I check the porch light. It is on. Story 2, Pad 12. The wind off the mesa was running about 30 when I climbed up onto the catwalk to read the suction pressure on the number 2 separator. It came across the pad in long, flat pushes, the kind that made my hard hat wobble on its sweatband and pushed grit through the gap between my hood and my safety glasses. The gauge read 48 pounds. That was fine. That was where it was supposed to be. I clicked the radio twice, the way Tom liked us to, and stepped back down off the catwalk. The pad was lit by 4 sodium lights on tall poles at the corners, the kind that cast everything in that yellow-orange tint that makes red look like rust and skin look like a magazine that has been sitting in a window. The light did not reach all the way out to the fence. Past the fence, the desert went black in every direction and stayed black for about 30 miles, which was how far it was to the nearest town big enough to register on a map. We were 30 miles outside Farmington, off County Road 234, on a piece of Bureau of Land Management lease that the company called the Loomis. Pad 12. 8 horizontal wells producing into a manifold, the manifold flowing to a battery of 4 tanks, the tanks running through a separator and a heater treater that I was responsible for monitoring tonight. The work was not hard. The work was babysitting a piece of equipment that had been engineered to babysit itself, and most nights nothing happened, and the company paid me $31 an hour to make sure nothing kept happening. I was 31 years old. My name was on a clipboard hanging from a nail in the shack, and so was my coworkers' names. Travis Brody, Tom Garza, Pete Harlan. 3-man night crew, Friday into Saturday, 12-hour shift, 6 in the evening to 6 in the morning. I had Mason at home, 14 months old, asleep in his crib at this hour, and my wife Jen asleep in the bed I would climb into around 8 in the morning after the drive back. I had been working nights for 2 years now. The money was good. The pay was as good as I had ever made. We had been saving for a piece of land outside Aztec where the cell signal was no good, but the well water was, and we figured another year and a half and we would have the down. Tom was on the radio. Travis, read. I clicked the talk button. 48. 48, Tom said. Yep, pressure's good, choke is good, let it ride. Coming back to the shack in 10. Copy. I stood for a second at the bottom of the catwalk and looked out past the fence at the dark. There was no moon. The stars were as thick as they always are out there, but the wind was blowing dust up into the lower sky, and it muddied everything down by the horizon. I could just make out the dark line where the mesa came up, about a mile west of the pad. I could hear coyotes a long way off. They were not yipping. They were just calling. One a minute, maybe. Long single notes that the wind broke up before they reached me. I walked back to the shack. The shack was a 30 by 12 site trailer that the company had hauled out there on a flatbed the week after the frac crew had finished. It had a propane heater, a coffee maker, a folding card table, 3 chairs, and a small TV bolted to the wall that did not pick up anything but static. There was a desk with a logbook on it and a computer that talked to the SCADA system on the pad. Pete was at the desk. He had his reading glasses on, the cheap kind from the gas station, and he was looking at the screen. Pressure looks good, Pete said. Same as last hour. Same as last 6, Pete said. Quiet one. Pete was 58. He had been in the field since he was 18 years old. Drilled with the big rigs in the 80s, then went into completions in the 90s, then to flow back 10 years ago when his back started giving him trouble on the rig floor. He drank his coffee black. He chewed Levi Garrett. He did not say much, but he had been kind to me when I came on green 2 years ago, and I had a lot of respect for him. You want a refill? I said. I'm good. I poured myself a cup. The coffee tasted like it had been on the burner since the shift before ours, which was probably true. I sat in one of the folding chairs. The wind hit the side of the shack, and the shack rocked, the way they always do. I looked at the wall. There was a photo of my son taped above the calendar, Mason, 14 months, sitting on the kitchen floor, holding a piece of banana, looking at the camera like he had just figured out that the camera was an object. Jen had texted me the photo a week before, and I had printed it at the office and taped it up on my first night back after my hitch. Pete had told me when I taped it up, "That's a good-looking boy." That was a lot for Pete to say about anybody. I drank the coffee. I looked at the photograph. I thought about driving home. I tell this part because what came after it makes more sense if I tell it. I was thinking about Jen. I was thinking about the way she rolls toward me in the morning when I climb into bed, half asleep, and tucks her head under my chin, and how that has been the best moment of every workday for 2 years now, and how on my mornings off she rolls toward me the same way, and how I never told her that I noticed. I drank the coffee. The radio cut in. It was 3 words. The voice was a man's voice, low, and the words came through fast and chopped, like the talker had keyed the mic for half a second. He's coming back. That was all. The static came back up over it, and then the radio was just hiss again. Pete looked up from the screen. He took his glasses off. You hear that? Pete said. Yeah. Tom? Wasn't Tom? Pete put his glasses on the desk. He picked up the handheld. He keyed the mic. Tom, you on? There was a pause. Then Tom's voice came back. Normal. In the middle of a word, like he had keyed his mic late. Yeah, on the way back. About 4 minutes. Pete keyed his mic again. You key up just now? Just now is the first key in 20 minutes. Copy, Pete said. Some bleed from another lease. Get on in here. Copy. Pete put the handheld down. He looked at me. Bleed over. Probably. Probably. We sat there. We did not say what we were both thinking, which was that the voice had not sounded like any voice on the lease, and that the leases out here are far enough apart and the radios run on enough different channels that bleed over is a story you tell new hands, not a thing that actually happens. I will say now that the voice did not sound like Tom's voice. I want that on the record, because of what came later. The voice was a man's voice. Low, calm, not pitched up the way a panicked voice gets pitched up. Just 3 words, said evenly, and gone. Tom came in the shack a few minutes later. He stomped his boots on the mat and pulled his hood down and shook the dust off his vest before he came all the way inside. His face was windburned, but his face was Tom's face. He nodded at me. He took the cup of coffee I poured for him. He sat in the 3rd chair. He did not bring up the voice. We rode the shift out for the next hour without anything more. The wind kept up. The pressure kept reading. 48, give or take a half pound. The coyotes called from out in the dark. At 1:15, I went out for the rounds. At 2:15, Tom went out. At 3:15, I went out again. And when I came up to the fence at the far corner of the pad to check the cathodic protection box, I saw them. The coyotes. There were 7 of them. They were sitting in a line outside the fence. They were facing the pad. Their tails were tucked. Their ears were up. The wind was moving their fur. The way the wind had moved the coyote on the shoulder of 491 in a story another man had told me once, and I had not believed. They were not yipping. They were not moving. They were just sitting in a line, watching the pad. I keyed the radio. Tom. Yeah. Come up to the south fence. The cathodic box. There was a pause. On the way. I stood there. I did not move. The coyotes did not move either. The closest one was maybe 20 feet from me. It was not looking at me. It was looking past me. At the shack. Its eyes caught the light off the sodium and gave it back yellow. Tom came up alongside me. He stopped. He saw them. He stood there for about 10 seconds and did not say anything. Then he said, "Don't move slow. Don't move fast." "What are they doing?" Watching what?" "The shack." We stood there for another half a minute. The coyotes did not move. Then the one closest to me stood up. The others stood up after it. They turned all together, and they walked off into the dark in a single line, and they did not look back. They did not run. They walked. The line of them disappeared into the scrub past the fence, and the wind ate the sound of their feet inside of 10 seconds. Tom stood watching the dark where they had gone. "You ever see them do that?" I said. "Once," he said. "Long time ago. Up in the Bisti." "What's it mean?" He took a long breath. He did not turn his head. "Means I'm going to walk over to the wellhead and check valve 5. The pressure on the choke has been climbing. I want to make sure it ain't bleeding into the casing." "That doesn't answer the question." "No, it doesn't." He clipped the radio onto his vest. He gave the fence one more look. Then he turned and walked back toward the wellhead, which was about 150 yards across the pad from where we were standing. I watched him go. He moved out of the sodium light and into the dark, and then the next light caught him, and then he was past the next light and into the dark again, and the dark on the far side of the manifold was the kind of dark where I lost him. The handheld clicked in my hand. I'm at the wellhead, going to valve 5. Copy, 20 minutes. Copy, 20 minutes. I walked back to the shack. The wind had picked up again. I stomped my boots on the mat. I came inside. Pete had a sandwich out of his lunch cooler and was eating it slow, the way he ate 1 bite per minute. He looked at me. Tom went to check valve 5, I said. Said the choke pressure was creeping. Choke pressure ain't been creeping. That's what he said. Pete chewed. He swallowed. He took a sip of the coffee that had to be ice cold by now. He said nothing for a moment. Then he said, Coyotes at the fence? How'd you know? You came in different than you went out. I sat down. I did not say anything else. 20 minutes passed. I watched the clock on the wall, the analog one with the second hand sweeping, and I watched the SCADA screen for a pressure change on valve 5, and neither of them did anything they were not supposed to do. The valve sat at the pressure it had been at all night. The clock advanced second by second. The shack rocked when the wind hit. I keyed the handheld at the 20-minute mark. Tom. Nothing. Tom. On the way back? Nothing. Pete and I looked at each other. Pete put his sandwich down. He keyed his handheld. Tom. On me. Pete. Copy. Nothing. We waited. We tried again at 25 minutes. At 30. At 35. At 40. At 40 minutes, Pete stood up. He stood up slow because Pete did everything slow. He put his vest back on. He clipped his radio to his collar. He picked up the spare handheld off the desk and he tucked it into his pocket. He pulled his coveralls up the rest of the way and zipped them. He pulled his hood up over his hard hat. You stay, he said. Watch the screen. Don't come looking. If we ain't back in another 20, I want you to call dispatch and tell them we got a man down. All right. You don't leave the shack. All right. He went out the door. The door slammed behind him on the wind. I sat in the chair. I looked at the screen. The pressure on valve 5 was 46 pounds, 2 pounds under the rest of the manifold, which made sense if Tom had been working on it, but which would have set off an alarm if there were a leak, and there was no alarm. I looked at the wall, at the photograph of Mason. I want to be clear about what I felt sitting in that shack alone. I was not afraid for myself. I was afraid for Tom, and I was a little afraid in some way I could not name about the voice on the radio earlier and the coyotes at the fence, but I was not afraid for myself. I was 31 years old and I had a young son and a wife at home, and I was 100 yards from another grown man and an hour of paperwork from being able to call dispatch and have the company helicopter put up out of Farmington if it came to that. I was inside a heated trailer with a radio and a phone and a coffee pot, but sitting there with the wind hitting the shack, with the screen showing me a pressure reading that said everything was fine, I felt something I had never felt at work before. I felt watched. The shack had 3 windows, one above the desk, looking south, toward the pad, one in the kitchenette area, looking east, toward the cathodic fence, one in the bathroom, looking north, toward the access road. I checked each of them. I did it without turning the lights down. The windows showed me my own reflection mostly, and beyond my reflection the sodium glare of the pad, and beyond that the dark. There was nothing at the windows. There was nothing I could see at the fence. There was nothing on the access road, but I was watched. I went back to the chair. I sat down. I picked up the handheld. I keyed it. Pete. A long pause. Yeah. Pete's voice. Tight. Low. You got him? Another pause. Stand by. I stood by. I watched the clock. The second hand swept. The wind hit the shack. The handheld clicked again. Travis. Yeah. Coming back in. 2 of us. Tom got turned around in the dark out past valve 5. Lost his bearings. Stand by. Copy. I sat there. The screen showed valve 5 back at 48 pounds. The wind dropped, suddenly, the way it does in the desert sometimes, and the shack settled. And the absence of the sound of wind was so loud I could hear the heater clicking, and the second hand on the clock, and the buzz of the sodium light closest to the shack. I went to the south window. I watched. They came up out of the dark together. Two figures in coveralls, high-vis vests over the coveralls, hard hats, hoods up. Pete walking first, Tom walking behind, both of them at the same pace. Both of them with their hands in front of them, palms down, fingers loose, the way a man walks when he is being careful in the dark. I watched them come up to the shack. I watched Tom stop on the mat outside and stomp his boots. I watched Pete open the door. I watched Tom come in behind him. Tom pulled his hood down. His face was Tom's face. His eyes were Tom's eyes. He smiled at me. It was the same smile I had seen him use on his daughters in a photograph he had once shown me. Wide. A little tired. Easy. Got turned around in the dark out by valve 5, Tom said. Walked west when I should have walked east. Came up almost to the lease boundary before I figured it out. Pete found me coming back. You all right? I said. I'm all right. Cold. Coffee's there. He went to the pot. He took the cup down. He poured. He sat down in his chair. He drank. Pete sat at the desk. Pete did not look at me. I want to describe what I saw on Tom in those first 5 minutes because I have gone back over it again and again in my head, and I want to get it down in order. The first thing was the wedding ring. Tom wore a plain gold band. He had worn it on his left ring finger for 22 years. He had told me about his wife the night I started, told me when he had given her the ring, told me what it cost him in 1998 money, told me the story of the dent in it. From the time he had caught his hand in a hand tight on the rig floor in 2004, the ring on Tom's hand now was on his right ring finger. The hand it had been on for 22 years was bare. The second thing was the coffee. Tom drank his coffee with 2 sugars and a packet of powdered creamer. He had done this every night of every shift I had ever worked with him. He had a routine. He took the cup, poured the coffee, opened the sugar packets 2 at a time, tore the corner off, dumped them in. He stirred with the same plastic stir stick. He had teased me my first month about putting too much creamer in my coffee. He had said, if you wanted milk, you should have stayed on day shift. Tom poured his cup and drank it black. He did not look at the sugar. He did not look at the creamer. He drank it black, and he drank it like he had been drinking it black his whole life. The third thing was his tobacco. Tom chewed Copenhagen long cut wintergreen. I had seen him put a pinch in 1,000 times. He had even given me a pinch once, a year ago, when my own can had run out and I had not slept in 2 days. He had a habit of tapping the can twice against his thigh before he opened it. He kept the can in his right thigh pocket. He always had. Tom reached down and pulled a can out of his left thigh pocket. The label said Skoal. He opened it without tapping. He took a pinch. He put the can back in his left pocket. That was 3. I sat there in my chair across from him, and I did not say anything. I did not point at the ring. I did not ask about the coffee. I did not say a word about Skoal. I watched him drink. I watched him work the dip in his lip. I watched Pete sit at the desk with his back to us. Tom finished his coffee. He stood up. He stretched. He put his hood up. Going to walk the pad once, he said. Make sure I didn't leave anything by the wellhead. All right, I said. He went out the door. The door closed. The wind, which had come back up, slammed it. I looked at Pete. Pete had not turned around. Pete, I said. Don't. Pete. Listen. I said, don't. Pete still did not turn around. His shoulders were squared. His hands were flat on the desk. You saw it, I said. I don't know what you mean. You saw it. You found him. Pete put his head down between his hands. He was an old man. He was a careful man. He had been kind to me. He kept his head down for a long moment, and when he raised it back up, he did not turn it toward me, but he spoke clear, in a voice low enough that it did not carry past the desk. "You finish the shift, Brody," he said. "You finish the shift. You don't say nothing. You don't do nothing. You don't look at him different. You don't say his name out loud unless you have to. When the day crew comes in, you go home. You drive normal. You go in your house and you hug your boy and you lock your doors. You hear me? Yeah, I have seen this once before. What is it? You don't need to know what it is. You need to know what to do. And what to do is finish your shift and go home. Pete. Brody." I shut up. He was quiet for another long second. Then he said, "I am sorry I sent him out to that valve." I want to say something here about how Pete sounded. Pete sounded the way a man sounds when he has done a thing and is going to do the thing again because the alternative is worse. I have heard that sound in a doctor's voice once when our dog had to be put down, and the doctor said, "I'll give him the first shot now," in the same tone Pete used. The door opened. Tom came back in. He took his hood down. He smiled. He sat down. He pulled the can of Skull out of his left thigh pocket and tapped it twice against his thigh, which was the right tapping but the wrong can and the wrong pocket. He looked at me. He kept looking at me. "How's Mason doing, Brody?" he said. I want to be careful about how I say this. Tom had asked me about my son 100 times before that night. Tom had asked the way men ask about other men's kids, half attentive, half friendly, half just making sound. He had never said my last name when he asked. He had always said the boy, or Mason, or the little one. He never said my last name. He never said it because he was Tom and we worked together and we did not use last names with each other. The thing wearing his face said Brody. "He's good," I said. "That's good," the thing said. "How old now?" 14 months. 14 months, the thing said. It said it like it was tasting it, like the officer on the highway in another man's story had tasted 6 hours. That is a good age. Walking? Walking. Sleeping good? Sleeps all night. Good, the thing said. That's good. They sleep deep at that age. Bet you don't lock the back door anymore now that he's getting around. I did not answer. I held the handheld in my hand, and I did not key it. I did not look down. "You should," the thing said. "Lock the back door, I mean. You never know." It smiled. I went out for rounds at 4. Pete had the spare radio. He sat at the desk and he watched the screen, and he did not look at me as I went out the door. "Take Tom with you," Pete said. He said it without turning his head. He said it because he had to say something to make it look like a normal shift, because somebody listening might be listening. And because if Pete had let me go out alone, the thing wearing Tom's face might have followed me into the dark on its own. Sending the thing out with me put us in front of Pete's eyes through the window for as long as we were on the lit part of the pad, and put us together in the dark where the thing already knew I knew. So Pete was choosing the version that kept the rules of the shift intact. I understood it. I hated him for it. I went anyway. "Tom," I said. "On me. Rounds." "On you," the thing said. It stood up out of its chair the way a man stands up out of a chair, which is to say, it pushed up off the seat with its hands and rolled forward off the front edge of the cushion and onto its feet. The motion was right. The motion had always been right. The motion had been right every time it stood up that night. But there was a half-second pause between the hands leaving the chair and the feet finding the floor that was a half-second too long, and I had to look away, because the half-second was where the thing did not look like Tom. We went out the door together. The wind came at us cold. We crossed the pad to the manifold. The sodium light caught us both, and then the manifold cast a shadow, and we walked into the shadow and out the other side. I did not look at the thing. I watched my boots. I watched the gravel. I felt it walking next to me at the same pace I was walking, half a step back, the way Tom had always walked rounds with me. We came to the manifold. I climbed up the catwalk. I read the suction gauge on number 2, 48 pounds. I climbed back down. The thing was waiting at the foot of the catwalk. "How's it read?" it said. 48. Choke holding. Choke is holding. We walked on. We came to the wellhead. I checked the master valve. I checked the wing valves. I read the pressure on the casing. The thing stood about 5 feet away from me with its hands in its coverall pockets, and it watched me work. It did not offer to help. It did not say anything. It watched. When I had read all the gauges, I stood up off the wellhead and turned to walk back to the shack, and the thing did not turn with me. It stood there. It looked at me. "Travis," it said. "Yeah, you ever wonder what's out past the lease?" I did not look at it. "Wonder how." "At night," it said, "when the lights of the pad are behind you, when the moon is down, when the wind drops. You ever go out past the fence and stand in it?" "No." "You should," it said. "Once in your life you should walk out past the fence, about 100 yards, until the lights of the pad don't reach. And you should stand there and listen for what's living out there. I got a job to do." "You got time," it said. "It only takes a minute. You walk out, you stand, you listen, you come back. Nobody knows you did it." "I'm going back to the shack," I said. "Pete won't know," it said. "Pete's old. Pete's tired. Pete's been at the desk for an hour. Pete's not going to come looking for you." I started walking back to the shack. The thing fell in beside me. Half a step back. The same pace. The wind came at us from the side now, broadside, and pushed against my left shoulder and the left shoulder of the thing in equal measure. We walked. About halfway back to the shack, the thing said, "It's a real pretty boy, your Mason." I did not answer. "You ever take him out in the desert?" it said. "When he's old enough? Up to the Bisty. You ever walk him out there?" "No." "You should," it said. "Once. In his life. You should walk him out. You should show him what's out there. He's 14 months. "Not now," it said. "When he's old enough. When he can walk. When he can stand. When he can hold his head up and watch the dark the way a man watches the dark." "All right," I said. "All right," it said back. It said it the way a man says "all right" to a kid who has agreed to something the kid did not understand. It was an indulgent sound. It was a sound men make to other men's children, not a sound men make to other men. We came up to the shack. I stomped my boots. The thing stomped its boots. I went in. The thing went in behind me. Pete was at the desk where he had been. Pete looked up and looked at me, and his eyes did the smallest thing, a small lift, and I knew he was telling me he had been watching us the whole time through the window. I sat down in my chair. The thing sat down across from me. It put its hands flat on its knees, and it watched the door. I made it the rest of the shift like that, 2 more hours. At 10 minutes before 6, the day crew's truck headlights came up the access road. The thing wearing Tom's face was at the south window when they came in. It was looking out at the truck. It did not turn around. "Day's here," I said. "Day's here," the thing said. Pete stood up. He gathered his lunch cooler and his thermos and his clipboard. He moved to the door. He held the door open. He looked at me for the first time since the night before. "Come on, Brody." I came. I did not look at the thing wearing Tom's face. The thing stayed at the window. The day crew came up onto the steps. We passed them on the way out. Pete said good morning to them. I said good morning to them. The day shift foreman, a man named Darrell I had known for 2 years, asked where Tom was, and Pete said, "He's inside. He's tired. Long night." We got in the crew truck. Pete drove. We pulled out onto the access road. Pete did not say anything for the first 10 miles. I did not say anything either. The sun was just coming up over the mesa to the east, and the sky was the color of dust. At about mile 10, Pete said, "You lock that back door tonight." "I will." "You lock it every night." "I will." "You don't tell Jen about this. Don't tell anybody." Pete, Brody, we rode the rest of the way in silence. I drove home from the office. I drove the speed limit. I came up the gravel road to my trailer at 7:20 in the morning. I went inside. Jen was in the kitchen with Mason on her hip. She turned and smiled at me, and the smile was Jen's smile, and Mason reached for me, and his eyes were Mason's eyes, and his hands were Mason's hands, and I picked him up and I held him for a long time before I went to the back door and locked it. I did not tell Jen. I slept that day in patches. Jen kept Mason out of the bedroom, and I lay in the dark and I listened to her singing to him in the kitchen, soft, the way she did. Every time I started to drop into real sleep, I would hear something. The shack rocking, a boot on a mat, a voice saying Brody. I would jerk back up and sit on the edge of the bed and listen to the trailer and to Jen's voice and to Mason's small laugh, and then I would lie back down and try again. I think I slept maybe 2 hours total. I gave up at 3 in the afternoon and got up and went out to the kitchen and helped Jen with dinner. She asked me what was wrong. I told her I had not slept well. She put her hand on my face and looked at me. I let her look. She did not see it. I am grateful she did not see it. I called dispatch the next morning to ask about my Monday shift. The dispatch woman, Carla, told me that the pad was shut down. I asked her why. She said, Tom Garza didn't make shift change. Pete says he wandered off in the night. Sheriff and search and rescue are out there now. I said, Tom made shift change. Carla was quiet for a second. Then she said, Honey, Pete called in this morning and said Tom was gone. I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand for a long time after that call. I thought about what to say. I thought about what Pete had done. He had let the thing walk out of the shack with the day shift in the lot, and the thing had walked off down the access road, and Pete had told the day shift that Tom was tired and was going for a walk to clear his head. And then Pete had clocked out and gone home, and the day crew had not seen Tom again because there was no Tom for them to see, and now Pete was making the call he had to make to start the clock on the search. To make a body that could be found, to give Tom's wife and daughters a thing to bury. I understood what Pete had done. I am still not sure I forgive him for it. The body came in 3 days later. A hunter from Bloomfield found Tom about a mile from Pad 12, on the other side of the mesa, in a wash. The coyotes had been at him. The cause of death, the coroner finally settled on, was exposure. They figured Tom had wandered off in the dark and gotten disoriented and laid down, died of cold. The wedding ring was on his left hand. His can of Copenhagen was in his right thigh pocket. The right pocket had been chewed open by the coyotes, but the can was inside it. The search and rescue people had been looking for 2 days, and they had been looking in the wrong direction. Pete had told them Tom had walked off east toward the road. They had searched east. The body was a mile west. Nobody asked Pete why his information had been wrong. Pete had worked nights for 30 years, and people accepted that a man's memory, after a long shift, was not a thing you took to court. A local paper ran a small piece about Tom. Veteran oilfield hand, 15 years with the company, beloved by his crew. There was a photograph of him from a Christmas party 3 years back. He was smiling. His wedding ring was on his left hand. His daughters had their arms around his neck. He looked happy. I drove out to the spot a week later. By myself. I parked on the lease road, and I walked across the scrub to the wash. The crime scene tape was still up. The ground where the body had been was darker than the ground around it, but not by much. I stood there for a long time. The wind was up. The coyotes were quiet. I did not pray. I am not a praying man. But I said his name out loud. I said it once. I said it in case anybody, anything, was listening, and in case it mattered to him that somebody had said it on that ground. Then I walked back to my truck and I drove home. I went to the funeral. I stood in the back. I shook hands with people I did not know. I shook hands with Tom's 2 daughters, and I shook hands with their husbands. I looked at Tom in the casket. The face was Tom's face. The wedding ring on his left hand was Tom's wedding ring. Maria, his wife, came up to me at the reception in the parish hall. She had a plate of food in one hand, and she set it down on the table to take both of mine. She looked at me. Her eyes were red. Her face was puffy. She had been crying for 3 days, and she would cry for many more. She held my hands, and she said, Tom thought a lot of you. He talked about you. He said you were a good young man, and the boy was lucky to have you. I said, Tom was good to me. I owe him a lot. She squeezed my hands. She held them a half beat longer than a handshake should hold. Then she let go and picked up her plate and went back to the table where her daughters were sitting. She had her wedding ring on her left hand that day. I made sure to look. It was on the left. I worked the next shift after the funeral. Pete was there. We pulled up to pad 12 in the crew truck at 6 in the evening, and we sat in the truck for about 30 seconds before we got out. The pad was the same. The shack was the same. The wind was running low. The sodium lights were the same yellow. There were no coyotes at the fence. There were no coyotes anywhere I could see. Pete killed the engine. He looked at me. "You ready?" he said. "No, me neither." We got out. We worked the shift. Pete and I did not talk about Tom. We did not talk about the night. We worked together for another 6 months, and we did not talk about it once. Pete retired 6 months later. He moved to Texas. He told me at his retirement breakfast at the diner in Aztec that he was going to live near his sister, and he was going to fish, and he was going to not work nights ever again. I told him I was happy for him. He shook my hand. He held it a half beat too long. He said, "You take care of that boy." We exchanged Christmas cards for 2 years, and then we did not anymore. He passed in 2022. Heart. His sister sent me a small note. I drove out to the cemetery in Aztec where they had brought him back to be buried next to his wife, and I stood at the headstone for a while, and I said his name out loud the same way I had said Tom's, and I drove home. I am still in the field. I am still on nights. I lock the back door every night now, and Jen has not asked me why. Mason is 6 years old, and he runs and he plays, and he sleeps deep, the way the thing said he would. A year after Tom died, I was at the grocery store in Aztec on a Saturday morning, and I saw a woman in the checkout line ahead of me, and the woman was Tom's wife, Maria. I had met her once at a company barbecue 3 years before. She had hugged me at the funeral and held me a half beat longer than I expected, and thanked me for being good to her husband. I had not seen her since. She turned when she heard my voice asking the cashier about a milk price. She smiled. "Travis," she said. "Maria, how are you holding up?" "Holding up," she said. She smiled bigger. "How is the family?" "Good. Mason is good. Jen is good." "That's good," she said. "That's real good." She stepped past me toward the bag out, and as she went by, her arm came up to push her hair behind her ear, and the ring on her hand caught the fluorescent light over the register, and it threw a small piece of light across my eye. The ring was on her right hand. I did not say anything. I paid for my milk. I drove home. I locked the back door behind me when I came in. Jen asked me what was wrong, and I said I was tired. Mason was on the kitchen floor, holding a piece of banana, looking at me the way he had looked at the camera in the photograph I had taped to the shack wall a long time before. I picked him up. I held him for a long time. I have not been back to that grocery store. I have not asked anybody about Maria since. I do not look for the obituary. I do not want to know. Some nights I dream that I am back in the shack and Tom is standing at the window with his back to me, looking out, and he is going to turn around. I wake up before he turns around. I wake up. I check the back door. I check the front door. I check the window in Mason's room. Then I lie in bed next to Jen in the dark, and I listen to her breathe. She rolls toward me. She tucks her head under my chin. I do not look at her left hand. I do not look at her right hand. I just hold her. That is how I sleep now. Story 3. Graveyard Dispatch. The coffee pot in the back room had clicked off about 20 minutes before, and I knew, without getting up to check, that the carafe was at the wrong angle on the burner, and the bottom inch of it was going to taste like a tire fire. I knew this because the pot had been doing it for 2 years, and we had been talking about replacing it for 2 years, and nobody had replaced it. I keyed the channel marker for 10:30 in the evening shift, start on the log, and I clicked over to the night frequency on the sheriff's console, and I leaned back in the chair to listen to the radios eat their first hour of silence. That was the start of it. 11 o'clock on a Thursday night in February at the Cibola County Sheriff's Dispatch in Grants, New Mexico. Outside the building, the temperature was about 20 degrees and falling. The streets had patches of dirty snow along the curbs from a storm 3 days back. I had 3 deputies on the road and 1 detention officer at the county jail across town and 1 supervisor at home on call. That was the night shift in Cibola. My name is on the log every shift I work. The log goes Ray Marquez, badge number 812, dispatch 10:30 in the evening through 6:30 in the morning. I had been dispatching for 4 years. I had been a deputy for 10 years before that, until a man in a backyard in Milan, New Mexico, ran from me through a chain-link fence, and I went over the fence and came down wrong and tore 3 things in my right knee that nobody could put back together. The county put me on the desk on light duty for 6 months and then offered me dispatch when the position came open, and I took it because the alternative was retirement at 38, and I was not going to be retired at 38. That was 4 years ago. I was 42 now. I lived in a small house off Roosevelt with a dog named Boots, who slept on the foot of my bed when I was home and slept on the couch when I was not. And I came home every morning at 7:15 and let her out and fed her and lay down on the couch and slept until 2 in the afternoon, and that was my life. I had been married once. Her name was Karen. She had been a paralegal at the firm in Grants that handled most of the divorces in town, which is the kind of irony you cannot make up. We met at a barbecue at a colleague's house in 2004, and we married in 2005, and we were married for 6 years. And she left in 2011, about a year after the knee thing, and about 4 months after I had gone on a bad jag drinking that she had tried to talk me out of, and that I had not let her talk me out of. She left clean. She moved to Albuquerque. We had no kids, and there was nothing to fight over, and I gave her the truck and the dog we had at the time, and she gave me the house. We had not spoken in 4 years. Her number was still in my phone under K. I do not know why I kept it. I do not know why she kept mine, but she did, because every year on November 14th, which was my mother's birthday, I would get a 1-line text from her that said, "Thinking of your mom today?" I would write back, "Thanks, Karen." That was the extent of our correspondence. I had not heard her voice in 4 years. The radio chirped. Deputy Sandoval, working the South Beat. Cibola Dispatch, 324, traffic stop, Highway 117, mile marker 42, New Mexico plate, running through. I keyed back. 324, copy, running plate. I ran the plate. The plate came back clean. I told Sandoval clean. He said copy. The traffic stop ended a couple of minutes later, and Sandoval came back on the channel to clear it. I logged it. That was the first thing on my shift log that night. The next hour was quiet. Deputies Sandoval and Sozi were south and east. Deputy Rivas was up north, working the road between Grants and the eastern edge of the Navajo Nation. I knew Rivas was probably parked at the all-night Phillips 66 on the corner of Highway 605 and Highway 180, drinking a cup of coffee out of the carafe at that gas station that was about as bad as ours. Sozi was probably at his aunt's house in Bluewater. Sandoval was the only one actually rolling. That was a normal Thursday. Sozi was Navajo. Mike Sozi, 31 years old, 6 years in with the department, lived in a single-wide trailer outside Bluewater with his wife and twin boys. He was a good cop, and a quiet one, and he had pulled my bacon out of a fire once at a domestic that had gone sideways my second year, and I owed him in a way I had not paid back yet. He worked the East Beat, which took him close to the Navajo reservation line. He never crossed the line. Reservation policing was Navajo tribal police business and BIA business, not county business, and Sozi kept that line clean. Rivas was the kid. Tom Rivas, 24, 3 years on, grew up in Grants, knew everybody, talked too much on the radio. Sandoval was 45 and quiet and had been on the department for 19 years and had not once made me ask him to clarify a single transmission. I had a soft spot for all 3 of them, and I liked the shift, and I liked the work, even if the work meant sitting in a swivel chair for 8 hours under a fluorescent light that had a slight buzz that I did not hear anymore until I was off shift. At 1 minute past 1 in the morning, the 911 line rang. I keyed my headset. 911, what is your emergency? The voice came through the line clear, a man's voice, middle-aged, calm, the kind of calm you hear from a man who used to be in the service or used to be a teacher, somebody who has had to hold his voice steady through something. Got a vehicle off the road, he said. Highway 9, east of Grants, about mile marker 37. I am stopped on the shoulder. Nobody appears to be in the vehicle, but I cannot see good in the dark. Looks like a pickup, older Chevy, light color. I logged the call. Sir, can I get your name, please? Sure. Name is Doug Begay. Doug, you safe where you are? I am safe. I am parked on the shoulder. Hazards on. Just figured I would call it in. Doug, thank you. I am sending a deputy. Stay where you are and stay on the line if you can. I can stay on the line. I keyed the radio. 312, Cibola. 312 was Sozi. There was a pause, and then his voice came back. Cibola, 312. 312. Single vehicle off the road. Possible accident. Highway 9 eastbound. Mile marker 37. Civilian on scene. Civilian is Doug Begay. Begay is on the line with me. Can you respond? 312 copy. En route. Approximately 12 minutes out. 312 copy. 12 minutes. I went back to the 911 line. Doug, deputy is en route. 12 minutes. Appreciate it. I kept Doug on the line the way you keep callers on the line. I asked him what he was doing out on Highway 9 that time of night. He said he was driving home from his sister's place in Thoreau. I asked him if he was cold. He said the truck heater was on. I asked him if there was any sign of the driver of the pickup. He said no sign, just the truck in the ditch with the front end down and the back end up and the cab light off. The cab light off was a small detail, and I noted it because most of the time a vehicle that has gone off the road has the dome on. The driver's door tends to be open. The keys are still in the ignition, and the dome light says so. We made small talk for 10 more minutes. Doug Begay was easy to talk to. He told me about his sister. He told me about his nephew who was up at New Mexico State. He told me he had worked on the railroad for 21 years and was retired now and was thinking about getting a dog. I told him I had a dog. He asked what kind. I said part lab, part everything. He laughed. He had a good laugh. He asked me what got me into dispatch. I told him I had been a deputy and had blown out my knee. He said that was a hard way to come off the road. He said his brother-in-law had been a sheriff's deputy down in Lea County for 20 years and had retired with bad hips. He said his brother-in-law was happy in retirement. He said most cops were not happy in retirement, but his brother-in-law was. I asked him what the difference was. He said his brother-in-law had taken up beekeeping. Beekeeping kept him out of his own head. He said maybe I should try beekeeping. I told him I lived in a house with a small yard and I was not sure about bees in a small yard. He said the bees did not care about the size of the yard. The bees cared about the flowers. He said it was the kind of thing where you could try it for a season and see if it took. I logged the call as in progress and entered Doug's name into the caller record and put a note in the description field saying, civilian on scene, helpful, retired railroad worker. I would not normally put that kind of detail in a call record, but he had been on the line for 15 minutes and I wanted Sozi to know what he was walking up on. A friendly civilian is a different scene than a hostile one, and the deputies appreciated the heads up. The radio chirped. Sozi, Cibola, 312. I am at mile marker 37, Highway 9 eastbound. There is no vehicle and no civilian on scene. The road and shoulder are clear in both directions. I keyed back. 312. Copy. Stand by. I went back to the 911 line. Doug, the deputy is at the location you gave me, and he says he does not see your vehicle or the pickup. Are you sure you are at mile marker 37? There was no answer. Doug, the line was open. I could hear the air on it. I could hear, faintly, the sound of an engine running, a heater fan, the small white noise a car makes from inside the cab. but nobody was talking. Doug, are you there? The line clicked. Doug Big A's voice came back. The calm was still there. I gave you the mile marker. I am at the mile marker I gave you. Maybe your boy is at the wrong one. I keyed the radio. 312, you confirm mile marker 37, Highway 9 eastbound? 312 confirms, Cibola. I am at the marker. There is nothing here. I went back to the line. Doug, are you sure you are on Highway 9? The line clicked twice. Doug Begay said, I am sure. I asked him for landmarks. He gave me landmarks that did not match anything I knew of on Highway 9 east of Grants. He described a gas station that was 120 miles north of where he claimed to be. He described a roadside cross that I knew was on Highway 491 south of Shiprock. I asked him to look at the next mile marker. He said he could not get out of the truck. He said his door was stuck. I asked him to look at his phone. He said his phone did not have GPS. The hair on the back of my neck started to do the thing that hair on the back of my neck does when something is wrong, but I cannot say what. I have had the feeling 4 times in my life. Once when I was 8 and my father pulled into the driveway and I knew, the way kids know, that my mother was dead in the kitchen. Once at a domestic with Sosie when I knew the man we were talking to had something in his back pocket. Once in a parking lot in Albuquerque when I knew the kid asking me for directions was setting me up. And once now. Doug, I am going to have to disconnect this call and try to ping your phone. Stay on the line. All right. I disconnected. I keyed the radio. 312, return to patrol. Bad call. We'll follow up. 312, copy. Returning to patrol. I logged it. I marked it bad info. I sat in the chair and I stared at the screens. The CAD system showed no other open calls. The mapping software showed the 3 sheriff's units on the county map, 3 little blue triangles, each one in its zone. The security cameras in the lobby and the parking lot and the back hall showed empty rooms and empty halls and empty lot. I poured a fresh cup of coffee from the pot in the back room. It tasted like a tire fire. I sat back down. At 1:53, the 911 line rang again. I keyed up. 911, what is your emergency? The voice came through. The same voice. A little different now. The pitch was the same. The cadence was the same. But there was something in the rhythm of the speech, in the way the consonants came off the tongue, that had not been there in the first call. It was softer at the edges. It was the way Mike Sosie talks. I had spent 8 years working alongside Mike Sosie. I had heard him speak 10,000 times on the radio and across the front seat of a patrol car and at the dispatch counter and at his kids' birthday parties at the park in Grants. I knew the way he ended his sentences. I knew the way he held the last consonant of a word before he started the next one. The voice on the line had picked it up. I called this in earlier, the voice said. About the pickup. Vehicle is still here. Driver still missing. Sir, I said. Where are you, sir? On Highway 550, just north of Cuba. I had my hand on the radio key already. I let go of it. Highway 550 north of Cuba was about 90 miles from where the same caller had reported he was 20 minutes ago. There was no way a man on a phone in a stopped truck on Highway 9 east of Grants could be on Highway 550 north of Cuba 20 minutes later. There were not roads. There were not cars. There was not time. Sir, I said, what is your name? You know my name. Sir, I need your name. Marquez. You know my name. I went very still in the chair. The voice had used my name. The first call had not. The first call had been Doug Begay, civilian, calm, friendly. The Doug Begay voice had not asked who I was. The Doug Begay voice had not had my name to ask with. Sir, please, your name. The voice paused. Then it said, Doug Begay. Same as before. Doug. Earlier, you were on Highway 9 east of Grants. How did you get to Highway 550 north of Cuba? I drove. Same as anybody. Doug. That is a 90-mile drive. Marquez. Doug. Marquez. You know I would not call this in if it was not real. I keyed the radio. I tried to raise Sosie. 312, Cibola. There was a pause. The pause stretched. The pause went past the 4 seconds it usually went and into 7 and 10 and 12. I keyed again. 312. Cibola. 312. On this channel. Nothing. I felt the chair seat under me. I felt the coffee cup in my left hand. I felt the press of the headset against my ear. I felt the hair on the back of my neck. I felt the chill of the dispatch room, which somebody had set the thermostat too cold and which we had all complained about and which nobody had fixed. 3, 12, 10, 20, I said. 1020 is officer's location. Nothing. I keyed the all call. Cibola dispatch to all units. Status check. Sandoval came back. 3:24:10:8 traffic. Highway 117 mile marker 18. I waited for Rivas. Rivas should have come back next. Rivas talked too much on the radio. Rivas had never failed to respond to a status check in 3 years. Nothing. 318. Status check. 318 was Rivas. Nothing. The voice on the 911 line was still there. The line was still open. I had not disconnected. The voice had not disconnected. Marquez, the voice said. Your boy Sozi is not on the channel. I will tell you where he is. He is at mile marker 37, Highway 9, eastbound. He is standing on the shoulder. He is looking at a vehicle in a ditch that was not there when he got there. He is looking at a vehicle in a ditch that came after he got there. I will let you guess what is in the vehicle now. I disconnected the call. I keyed the radio. 312, dispatch. 312. The radio gave me back nothing. I keyed Sandoval. 324, dispatch. 324, status check on 312 and 318. Last known 312 was Highway 9 mile marker 37. Last known 318 was Highway 605. Sandoval came back fast. 324 copy. En route to Highway 9 to check on 312. 324 also unable to raise 318 on channel issues. 324. Advise the supervisor. I am calling the supervisor. 324 copy. I picked up the admin line. I dialed Sergeant Aragon's home number. The phone rang twice and went to voicemail. Sergeant Aragon kept his phone on the nightstand. Sergeant Aragon picked up on the first or second ring every time. I dialed again. Same. I dialed the State Police Dispatch in Albuquerque. I got static. I dialed the BIA office in Crown Point, which handled the Eastern Reservation line. I got static. I dialed the cell phone of the detention officer at the jail across town. I got static. I picked up the admin line and got a dial tone. I dialed my own cell phone from the desk line. My own cell phone in my pocket rang. The line worked. The connections worked. When I dialed numbers I knew worked. The 911 line rang again. I sat there. I looked at the line. The light was blinking. The light was blinking, the same way it had blinked twice already that night. I let it ring 4 times. I let it ring 6. I picked it up. 911. The voice was different again. The pitch had come up. The cadence was fast. The voice was talking before it had even finished saying hello. It was a young voice. It talked too much. Cibola. This is a civilian. Name is Doug Begay. I am calling in a vehicle off the road. Highway 9. Mile marker 37. But wait, no. That ain't right. Hold on. Where am I? The voice paused. The voice was thinking. The voice was building. The voice came back. 84. I am at mile marker 84 on Highway 550. That was further north now. That was past Cuba and into the Badlands. The voice was Rivas. The voice was Tom Rivas, the kid, 3 years on, who talked too much on the radio. The voice had Rivas's hurry. It had Rivas's habit of starting a sentence and not knowing where the end of the sentence was. It had Rivas's tendency to say, between words. I sat in the chair. I did not say anything. I let the line stay open. Cibola, the voice said. Now it was just Rivas. The thing had stopped pretending to be Doug Begay. Cibola, you reading me. This is 318. I am at the wreck. Pickup is rolled. There is a man in it. He is hurt bad. I need an ambulance to Highway 5, 50-mile marker 84. He is hurt real bad. Cibola, send a bus. Send a bus. He is talking to me, but he ain't, like, his words ain't right. His mouth is doing a thing. Cibola. I did not key the radio. I did not dispatch a bus. I did not move. Cibola, you reading me. 318 requesting emergency medical transport. Marquez, Ray. You hear me, Ray? I unmuted the line. I said, 318, dispatch is on the line. Confirm your location. Mile marker 84, Highway 550. 318. How did you get to mile marker 84 on Highway 550 when you were last reporting from Highway 605 40 minutes ago? The voice paused. The voice said, Ray, why are you talking like that, brother? I am asking for a bus. Send the bus. 318. Confirm the make and model of the vehicle. Older Chevy. Light color. 318. Confirm the location of the driver. In the cab. Hurt. Send the bus. 318. Confirm the name of your watch supervisor. The voice paused. The voice said, Ray. Brother, why are you doing this? Send the bus. I muted the line. I keyed the radio. 324, dispatch. Sandoval came back. 324. 324, what is your 1020? 324 is now on Highway 9 eastbound, approaching mile marker 37, approximately 7 minutes out. 324, copy. Slow your approach. I have lost contact with 312 and 318. I have lost contact with the supervisor. I have lost contact with state and BIA. I am keeping the line open with you. Do not lose me. 324, copy. Sandoval, keeping you on the line. 324, also unable to raise anyone else on any channel. 324, what is the temperature out there? 324, 18 degrees. Sky is clear. Stars out. No moon yet. 324, you got the windows up. 324, windows up. 324, keep them up. 324, copy. The 911 line was still open, with the voice that had been Rivas. The voice was talking. The voice was saying, send the bus. Send the bus, Ray brother. Send the bus. The voice was not asking anymore. The voice was reciting. I disconnected. The line rang again. I did not pick up. The line rang 6 times, 10, 20. The line rang for a long time. I sat in the chair. I watched the light blink. I kept my finger on the kill switch, but I did not throw it, because if I threw the kill switch, the line would go dark and any real caller on the way to the dispatch would not get through. There were people out there in the county who needed help right now, and the line had to be open for them. The line stopped ringing. The line rang again. I picked up 911. The voice came through the line, and the voice was Karen. The voice was my ex-wife. The voice was the woman I had been married to for 6 years, and who had left me 8 years before, and the voice was hers, with the same little catch in the breath she had when she was trying not to cry, and the same way she said my name, Ray, just the one syllable, like she was tasting it. Ray, I am at the diner off 605. I rolled the car. The car is in the ditch. I need you. I need you to come. I sat in the chair. I put my left hand on the edge of the desk. I held the edge of the desk. I felt the wood. I felt the small chip where somebody had set down a coffee cup too hard once and broken the laminate. I felt the cool of the wood under my hand. Karen, I said. Ray, come now. Please. Karen, what year did we get married? The voice paused. The voice said, Ray, come on, baby. Why are you doing this? I am hurt. Come. Karen, what year did we get married? The voice paused longer. The voice said, Ray, you know what year. 2005. June. The church on the hill. My sister was my maid of honor, and your brother was your best man, and we drove down to Carlsbad for the honeymoon because we could not afford anywhere else. Come now, please. I am cold, and the car is in the ditch, and I cannot feel my left arm. The details were right, most of them. The church on the hill was right. The maid of honor was right. Carlsbad was right. The month was wrong. We had married in May, not June. The voice had given me June, and that small thing, that 1 month off, was a thing the real Karen would not have gotten wrong even after 4 years apart, because we had argued about June versus May the day we set the date, and that argument had been a piece of our marriage we had laughed about for 6 years, and the woman I had been married to would not have forgotten what month we had married in. Karen, I said. What month? The voice paused. The voice did not answer. Karen, what month did we marry in? The voice said, in a different register. Smooth now, level. Marquez, I am close. I disconnected. I locked the dispatch room door. I had never locked the dispatch room door in 4 years. The lock was the kind you turn on the knob from the inside, the cheap kind, the kind a man with shoulders could push through if he wanted to. I turned the lock. The lock turned. I sat back down. I keyed the radio. 324, dispatch. 324, you on me. Sandoval came back. 324, 10-8, Highway 9 eastbound, approaching mile marker 37. 324, you see anything? 324, headlights ahead. Pulled over on the shoulder. Looks like 312's unit. Lights are off. 324, do not approach the unit. 324, what? 324, do not approach the unit. Slow to a stop in your lane. Maintain distance. Do not exit your vehicle. 324, copy, holding. The 911 line rang. I did not pick up. The line rang. It rang for a long time. The line stopped ringing. The breathing started in the headset. It was just breathing. It was a man's breathing. It was steady. It was close. It was the kind of close where the breath would have been hitting the inside of my ear if it had been a real breath in a real ear. The headset was over both my ears. The breathing was in both channels. The breathing was patient. I took the headset off. I set it on the desk. The breathing kept coming through the speakers on the desk because I had the dispatch speakers on. I muted the speakers. The breathing stopped in the speakers. The breathing started in the room. It was behind me. It was in the corner of the dispatch room behind the chair, near the door. It was the same breathing. Steady, patient, close. I did not turn around. I keyed the radio. I keyed it without looking. 324, dispatch. 324. 324, what do you see? 324, I see 312's unit. Lights off. I do not see 312. The driver's door is open. There is no vehicle in the ditch. I repeat, there is no vehicle in the ditch. The road is empty. 324, get back in your car. Get back in your car right now and drive. Drive west. Drive to the office. Do not stop. Do not respond to any other call. Drive. 324 copy. Moving. The breathing in the room behind me changed. It did not get louder. It did not get closer. It changed in a way I cannot describe except that it had been a man's breathing, and now it was a breathing that was the shape of a man's breathing, but the source was not a man. The way the breath moved had a different geometry to it. The cycle was wrong. The pause between inhale and exhale was too long, and the inhale was too short, and the exhale was too long, and underneath the breath there was a second sound, a low one, like a thing in the back of a throat that did not belong to the throat it was in. The breathing was about 6 feet behind my chair. I did not turn around. I keyed the radio. 324. 324. En route west on Highway 9. 12 minutes from the office. 324. Keep talking. 324. What about? About anything. Talk about your kids. Sandoval had 3 kids. The oldest was 19. The youngest was 8. He started talking about his kids. He talked about his oldest at New Mexico Highlands. He talked about his middle daughter who wanted to be a vet. He talked about his youngest who had lost his first tooth a week back. I kept the channel open. I kept his voice in the headset. I put the headset back on. I let his voice fill both my ears. The breathing behind me kept its rhythm. It did not come any closer. I did not go any further. Sandoval talked for 12 minutes. I do not remember most of what he said. I remember the cadence of his voice, and I remember the warmth of it in the headset, and I remember keeping my hands on the edge of the desk and my eyes on the security camera monitor that showed the lobby outside the dispatch room. The lobby on the monitor was empty. The hallway was empty. The back hall was empty. The parking lot was empty. The breathing was 6 feet behind me. I watched the monitor for the hallway. The hallway was a 40-foot length of cinder block, painted a kind of institutional cream. There were 2 doors off it on the right side, one going to the break room and one going to the records room. There was 1 door on the left side, which was the bathroom. At the end of the hall was the lobby. The hallway was empty. The lobby was empty. I watched the hallway for 12 minutes. I did not look at the corner of the dispatch room behind me. I did not turn my head. I did not let my eye drift to the right where the door was. I watched the monitor. The hallway was empty. The hallway was empty. The hallway was empty. A shadow passed across the hallway camera. I saw it. It was small. It was the kind of shadow a moth makes when it flies between a light and a wall. The hallway light was a long fluorescent tube above the middle of the hall, and the shadow came from above the tube and crossed the floor of the hall and moved out of the frame. There were no moths in February. There were no flying insects in the building in February. The hallway was sealed and heated, and the fluorescents had not been opened in years. The shadow came back. It crossed the other way. It moved differently this time. It moved the way a finger moves across a beam of a flashlight in the dark. It was not random. It was somebody or something walking past the light. I keyed the radio. 324, what is your ETA? 324, 8 minutes. 324, keep talking. He kept talking. He told me about his middle daughter, the one who wanted to be a vet, and the science project she was doing on cattle diseases that was going to win her the regional fair. He told me about the dog his family had had when he was a boy, a German shepherd named Wolf, who had died on the kitchen floor at age 14 with the whole family around him. He told me about his uncle's funeral last summer. He talked the way a man talks who knows that talking is keeping somebody else alive. The breathing behind me kept its rhythm. The thing in the hallway, if there was a thing in the hallway, did not approach the dispatch room door. It moved across the hall light a 3rd time, and then it stopped. At 2 minutes past 5, Sandoval pulled into the lot. I watched him on the camera. He got out of his unit. He had his hand on his sidearm. He came up to the lobby door. He buzzed. I buzzed him in. He came down the hall. He came up to the dispatch room door. He tried the door. The door was locked. Marquez. It's me. I unlocked the door. He came in. He looked around the room. He looked at me. He looked behind me. He looked at the corner near the door. Anybody in here with you, brother? I said, I don't know. He looked again. The corner was empty. The room was empty. The breathing was not in the room anymore. The breathing had stopped when the door opened, the way a hand pulls back from a flame the second the flame gets too close. Sandoval pulled up a chair next to me at the desk. He sat down. He did not put his sidearm away. We sat there until 6:30 in the morning. For about an hour, neither of us talked. Sandoval kept his hand on the grip of the sidearm and his eyes on the door. I kept my eyes on the bank of phone lights and the radio console. The 911 line did not ring again. The admin lines did not ring. The radios were silent. The fluorescent over the desk hummed the way it always hummed, and it sounded, for the first time in 4 years, like exactly what it was, which was a low and patient and useless noise. Around 3 in the morning, Sandoval said, "You want me to make a pot of coffee?" I said, "I am not going in the back room." He said, "Yeah." I figured. He stayed in his chair. We sat. The clock on the wall did its thing. The minute hand moved. The hour hand moved. The radios stayed quiet. The lights on the phone lines stayed dark. Outside the window of the lobby, which I could see on the camera, the parking lot was a frozen rectangle under a sodium lamp. A skinny coyote came across the lot at about 3:45. It walked slow. It stopped under the lamp. It looked at the lobby door for about 30 seconds. Then it walked off, and the lot was empty again. Sandoval saw it on the monitor. He did not say anything. At 6:15, I tried the radio. The radio worked. I raised State Police in Albuquerque. They answered. I raised the BIA in Crown Point. They answered. I raised Sergeant Aragon at home. He picked up on the first ring. He said his phone had not rung all night. I asked him to put units out for Sosi and Rivas. At 7 in the morning, Sosi radioed in. He was at the all-night diner on Highway 6. He said he had been there since 1 in the morning. He said he had not received any calls. He said his radio had been dead since the start of his shift, but he had figured he was in a hole and had not worried about it. He said when his radio came back at 6:50, he had called the office and nobody had answered, so he had come into the diner to wait it out. At 7:15, Rivas radioed in. He was at his apartment in Grants. He had clocked out at midnight. He had been off shift the whole time. He had not been working that night. He was off rotation. He was at home. He had been asleep in his bed. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. I checked the schedule. Rivas had been off shift. I had dispatched him at 1:12 in the morning anyway. I had dispatched a deputy who was not on duty. I had heard him respond to the dispatch. The CAD log showed the dispatch and the response. The CAD log showed his voice on the channel. The CAD log was wrong. The CAD log was a record of something that had not happened. I sat with Sandoval until 8 in the morning. The day shift came in. Sandoval drove me home. I did not ask him to. He drove me home. When I got to the house, Boots was at the door. She was not happy. She was facing the door when I came in, and the ridge of her back was up, and her tail was down, and her ears were up. She was looking past me. She was looking at the porch. She was looking at the space behind my left shoulder. I came in. I closed the door. I locked it. Boots watched the door for another minute, then sat. She did not lie down. She sat. She looked at the door. I did not go back to dispatch. I gave my notice the next morning. The county tried to keep me. Sergeant Aragon came out to the house, and we sat at my kitchen table, and he asked me what had happened, and I told him. He nodded the whole time. He did not interrupt. When I was done, he said, I have heard a story like that one once. I asked him whose story. He said, an old dispatcher, Bernalillo County, long time ago. He quit too. I asked him what had happened to the dispatcher. He looked at his coffee cup. He said, he went home and he did not answer his phone for 3 years. Then he answered his phone. Then he was gone. I asked Aragon what he meant by gone. He said, just gone. The house was empty when his sister came to check on him. Front door locked from the inside, phone off the hook, bed made, dog gone too, no note, nothing. We sat at the table for another 20 minutes after that, and neither of us said much. Aragon drank his coffee, I drank mine. When he stood up to leave, he put his hand on my shoulder and held it there for a second, and then he said, you take care, Marquez. You stay alive. I told him I would. I left dispatch. I took a private security job at the copper mine south of town. I worked days. I worked the gate. I checked badges. I drove a golf cart around a fenced property in the sun. The property had cameras and lights and chain link and people who came in at 7 and left at 5, and I sat at the gate booth and read books and watched the cars come in. I did not work nights again. I have not picked up a sheriff's radio. I have not been back in the dispatch room. I have driven past the office a couple of times on errands, and I have not looked at the building. I do not know who took my old shift. I do not want to know. Sosi and Rivas and I get coffee once or twice a year at the diner on Roosevelt. Sandoval retired the next spring. He took his pension and moved out to a piece of land near Blue Water Lake, and he calls me sometimes on Sunday afternoons just to check in. Neither of us has ever brought up that night out loud, but the calls happen with a regularity that makes me believe he thinks about it. I think about it. I think about it most nights when the sun has gone down and the house has gone quiet and Boots has settled at the foot of the bed. Boots is still with me. She is older now. She sleeps on the foot of the bed when I am home, and she sleeps on the couch when I am not, and once or twice a month she sits up in the middle of the night and looks at the bedroom door for a long time, and her ears are up and her ridge is up and her tail is down, and she does not bark, she just looks. I leave the porch light on. The phone in my kitchen has a number that the county dispatch desk has on its callback list. I have asked them to remove me from the list. They have said they would. The list has not been updated. Once in a while, the kitchen phone rings at a strange hour, and the screen shows the number for Cibola County Dispatch, and I do not pick up. I do not pick up. I let it ring. After a while, it stops. But last month, on November 14th, my cell phone buzzed in the middle of the night, and the screen lit up, and the number on the screen was Karen's old number, and the message was one line. It said, "Thinking of your mom today." I did not write back. I have not written back. I will not.